So welcome everybody. Thanks so much for being with us today. I'm Denise. I think I know nearly everybody. I work with the Immigrant Council, and Fidel just asked me to welcome you this morning. As always, there's a couple of thank yous that are very important. This is the third spin-off event for us for the TMFI, and Fidel's inspiration, but also thanks to Karen Vanya and Shinadu and Fidel for putting this together and the collaboration with TFMI. Important always to thank the funders, so the German Marshall Fund and the Robert Bosch Foundation. Welcome to Brian from Atlantic, and also to Dublin City Council, who are partnering the event for us again today. When Fidel first raised the idea and the concept, I suppose, of having a dialogue this way, there was concerns, particularly by some of the funders, but also ourselves, whether we would get participation and whether people would have the time to put the opinion pieces together. And so thank you to everybody. And there are some people who are going to present and others who've put in opinion pieces. And it's fantastic to have the breadth and the wealth of experience in the room. ICI are 10 years this year, and we, as most of you know, have about 10,000 people that access our service every year. And so we're a busy law centre that rarely gets an opportunity to lift its head above the pulpit, and I think for many in the room that's the same. So to have an opportunity, Piers was asking me earlier on, what did we want out of today as an organisation? And for us, it's just fantastic to be able to stop, think, have a dialogue around immigration and integration, particularly at a time when we're reflecting on our work over the last 10 years, the migration trends into Ireland and where we go from here on in. Many of the themes that were chosen are themes that are core to our work. Obviously, we're firefighting a lot of the time, so people are coming in and it's about what rights they get attributed through the immigration system. But obviously all the issues, that the themes that were suggested are themes that are so core to people who we work with and who access our service. It's just fantastic to read the essays. They're different, they're so rich, and I hope that all of you will really enjoy the session, and we're really looking forward to it. So thank you. Thanks to those who have travelled, and thanks to everybody for being here today. Thank you.
I think it was a very good initiative. I think getting essays like this and having this type of debate and this kind of thinking and thought is very important right now at the moment. It's not that integration has gone off the radar. It's something that if you ever look at any other countries that have fought or worked on integration, it has these dips where people tend to kind of let it go a little bit and leave it. And you can see the way the government maybe has not given us a junior minister for integration at this time. And it's really important that we do push this issue and the discussions of integration, interculturalism on the global level, because it's a very, very long process. It takes a long time, but people can take their eye off the ball. People can get tired and bored with it, and it's very important to keep this going. I've read a lot of the essays. I find them very interesting. There's some very, very strong opinion pieces in there. I'd like to Dublin City Council is certainly giving its support to this, and we would hope to continue and maybe bring back a couple of the key essays in the One City, One People campaign, which will be running again in September for the autumn. It's a campaign we started last year where Dublin, One City, One People, Dublin says no to racism and discrimination. It did very well last year. We want to try and continue that and make it an annual piece. This year we have a number of aspects to it, including a focus on Islam for the week. We'll be hopefully launching Dublin as an intercultural city with the Council of Europe Intercultural Cities programme. And there'll be a number of other exhibitions, debates, discussions, etc. right throughout the month of September. I think this would be ideal to draw a couple of the key essays or the key points that come out of today and make note of them. And I think in some forms you could also choose or ask some people to make presentations to the different Council of Europe heads, which you'll find very interesting.
We got this call for proposals, a number of, I think it was in January, from the German Marshall Fund. So when you got the call, I thought, okay, we have been organizing things, but we don't get a chance to sit down with various interests and then try to agree or disagree, at least identify what the issues are and so forth. So then I said, okay, but why don't we try something new? So what I was hoping was to bring people who represent different interests in a room, plus international experience, talk about migration in sort of, removing the hearts of the various organizations and institutions we represent, because we are normally sometimes prisoners of what we do. So if you are working in migration, that's what you do. You are in integration, that's what you do. Asylum, economic migration, and so forth. So I'm hoping today we have some space.
I think the issues that are particularly important, as far as I can see, are the issues of citizenship, because of the historically high rate of denial of citizenship to people who are long-term residents in Ireland and who are very much Irish by choice, who are here, who have staked their futures here with us. The issues of lack of access to education, in particular third level, to the children of migrants, which emanates from them not being citizens, because a lot of rights are still attached to citizenship. I would be particularly concerned about the experiences of some immigrant communities of disproportionate levels of racism and unemployment. Even at the height of the boom, for example, black people in Ireland were experiencing many times the rate of unemployment of white people, and we cannot expect that in harsh times things are much better, and I don't think we can let these sorts of issues slide. I think looking around at the various presentations pulled together by various people, that most of these issues are covered in some kind of way. But I think one of the debates we do need to have at the heart of all of this is one that focuses very much on racism. I've been working with the Immigrant Council of Ireland and their staff to do some research on experiences of racist violence, harassment and antisocial behaviour, and the findings are actually quite frightening. And certainly when it comes to looking at the experience of racism away from statistics on individuals' lives and the lives of families, on the experience of people trying to get by in their communities, I think we have some serious issues to face up to and to begin to address. And these are not easy jobs to do, but I think bringing some of these issues to light would be useful. And I certainly think we should have an agenda around integration that also includes a very strong focus on racism and discrimination.
Just to say that my current academic interest is in historical constructions of racism in Ireland, because I believe that racism in Ireland, in the sense of constructing the nation in an exclusive way, ethnically and racially, goes back a long, long way, much longer than the recent arrival of large numbers of immigrants. And I think that's part of the measure of the challenge that we face. All over Europe, we see the emergence of extreme right, xenophobic, racist parties. It hasn't happened in Ireland yet, but there is a very dangerous drift here at the moment, and there has been now for several years. And it's very important that we have debates like this to challenge what we mean by belonging, which I think is probably the best term I can think of anyway to describe a society where everyone feels accepted.
There are a few key points I'd like to make. The first thing is in terms of the level of change. What I always try to do when analysing these issues, and particularly looking at issues to do with equality in education, is to look at it in the broader social context. And I would feel quite strongly that there's a huge amount of change going on in Irish society. Obviously today we're talking about immigration, but there are other very significant changes, and those changes, and a lot of it in relation to the economic crisis, could be interpreted as quite traumatic for the society. But I actually take some hope from it, because I think it gives us an opportunity to stand back and say, what type of a society do we want to create? Where do we want to be? And particularly, I'm very keen in looking at where do we want to be in 20 years' time? What type of a society do we want to create? So I think this is a time of potential renewal, a time of transformation. But when I look at education, I think education is a very, very important mechanism through which change can actually be realised within society. And I started off my opinion piece by talking about education as a social and a civic good. And in a way, because education has that power within a society, education can also be seen to be the mechanism through which the society can be changed. So if you have any type of a problem within the society, it's let the schools take care of it. So if we have drug abuse, let the schools do a programme on drug education. If you have anything around sexuality education, let the schools deal with it. And I think that's important, but I think we also have to be realistic about what schools can actually do. And always in my work, what I've tried to do is to say, yes, schools can make a difference. Absolutely what teachers do in schools and how they reach out to the diverse communities can make a very substantive difference. And I've worked actually as a teacher in schools for 10 years before I started working in the university.
There is no doubt that our classrooms have changed forever. The presence of diverse student populations, along with a variety of different needs and abilities, are bringing to an end 20th century pedagogical practices, and about time too. Governments around the world are struggling to devise educational models that are fit for the 21st century. It's a huge challenge given our inability to predict both the economic and technological landscape of 5 years' time and capability of an educational system to evolve and keep pace. On top of all this, we in Ireland, along with many developed countries, are broke. However, I see this as an immensely exciting period with economic challenges providing innovative opportunities. We continuously hear that we need to be striving for an export-led economy. This will require companies with diverse teams, skill sets and competencies. This knowledge base is sitting in our classrooms. What differentiates us from 10 years ago is that we now have young Irish citizens who are perfectly at home in 2 or more cultures and whose cultural and linguistic repertoires can open up so many opportunities for this country. Of course, what I'm referring to here is a route to market, and our migrant communities can give us that. If only we could just see it.
My opinion piece addresses the issues concerning the highly skilled migration and return migration. I'm asking the following questions. Are there any grounds for such a trend, a return to the country of origin of the highly qualified? Could we talk about reverse brain drain? What is the motivation of the ones who return? Are they only being pragmatic, or do they also aim to contribute to the development of their society and their country of origin? What are the roles of the sending and the receiving states? So, having the experience of Ireland as well, and maybe doing a comparison with some other countries from, let's say, the Eastern European countries, we could elaborate a little bit on the concept of, is it really happening, that reverse brain drain, or is it essential to support it in a way? And in what sense this could bring a contribution for both sending and receiving societies?
So right now in the United States, we are in the midst of a very restrictive period in immigration policy. It is being led primarily by the states. When I was here in September, I spoke about a law that was passed in Arizona that we've successfully challenged in court that a lot of folks internationally have heard about. It's called Arizona's Senate Bill 1070, and it's got significant attention because what it essentially would have done, if allowed to be put in place, would have required local police anytime they had a basis to interact with someone, a legitimate stop, whether it was a traffic stop where they were investigating a crime, to verify their immigration status if they reasonably suspected the person was unlawfully present. And then certain things would follow, mandatory detention, et cetera, and ultimately deportation for the individual. What you see is this growing discomfort with the changing racial makeup in the United States. And it's not under the surface. The primary, in each of these states, the primary legislative representatives who have passed them are on record making racist comments in many cases, extremely things that you would not expect to be uttered publicly, much less in the legislative houses. And then in some of the bills, like in Indiana, you have the governor, for example, when he signed the bill, said, the goal of this is to make life intolerable for immigrants in the states so that they will leave, so that they will self-deport. We are going to make life so intolerable in every area that they'll leave.
So I worked with domestic violence for years, and while I worked with it, I developed this analysis that it is because of unequal power relations between men and women, and that's why it happens. And yet there's massive resistance to that. So very often people say it's because the family is poor, because the family is drunk, because the family's unemployed, because it's a traveller family, and it's always about a family. Actually, it's very often about a man perpetrating violence on his partner. Not in every case, but in the majority of cases that would have come to women's aid. So it was very important for me always to keep that analysis there. And then I moved to the Immigrant Council, and we also have a lot of cases presenting in the context of domestic violence. And again, I would hear, oh, but that's because it's a migrant family. This is a migrant issue. And only that I've worked in the area for so many years, I'd be saying, hang on a sec, it's not about religion, it's not about culture. We've done that in Ireland for a long time. We said it was because it was a traveller culture, or we said it was because it was a particular faith. So the importance of having not just a gender lens in the context of migration, but also having a feminist analysis for some of the issues that present. So for me, the importance, I suppose, of bringing together a coalition of groups when you're trying to effect systematic change, so that we're saying, yes, there are additional barriers for migrant women who are experiencing domestic violence, but making sure that when we do that, we don't separate them as a group and make them visible, so that that issue then becomes about migrant families, that we're very clear this is an issue about unequal power relations.
The vulnerabilities of wider unaccompanied minors and minor victims of trafficking are clearly identified in all the literature. Care provision, firstly and foremost, identification of minors and protection for those who are at risk of trafficking and re-trafficking. The gaps in service provision, as I mentioned, lack of national level joined up thinking and policy when it comes to particular minor victims of trafficking, the lack of social work supports that there is to work with the minors, for example, to cease contact with the traffickers, to perhaps give their full story, less risk again of re-trafficking that the minor would be in the position for.
And I know some of the papers and Fidel's touched on perceptions, labelling, stereotyping. And these come up again and again when we're talking to people who haven't got either personal interest or commitment to the area. So people are products of many myths out there. So one of the key things, how do we counteract these? Where is the leadership in all sorts, government, church, companies? Sometimes with companies it's better because you can actually push the business case. But a lot of, one of my questions is, how do we reach the majority group? How do we get them on board in terms of solidarity? We're sitting here today, all very committed people, in many ways preaching to the converted.
Enda Kenny passionately said, if you're Irish by birth, Irish by ethnicity, by association or by desire, you're welcome in Ireland. I've been here all these years and you never welcomed me in such a manner, so I thought, okay, maybe I should remind him, I want to be Irish by choice, but all these restrictions stand in my way, so what does that mean? So basically those are some of the things I was just pointing out.
I started off by deciding to do a more personal view because in my day-to-day work I have to constantly be so professional and objective and whatever, and I thought it would be a change. But as I kind of started thinking about it, I realised that my personal and professional experiences have been very much intertwined, so it made it that much more difficult, but it also made me think a lot more about the different kind of perspectives that I had and the experiences other people had related to me and so on. So it was a very useful exercise. I suppose my opinion piece reflects the fact that my experience of integration was generally relatively positive, and I'm under no illusion that that was in large part due to the fact that white, middle class, middle-aged, fairly well educated, I had a job, wasn't kind of a threat to anybody in terms of the kind of established values, but a range of events, and most particularly the consultations around the intercultural health strategy, made me so much more aware of the barriers people face in becoming integrated.
So there seems to be little political will to tackle racism. And my question is why? And I just postulate one potential factor in that, which I feel links a bit with what Pierce McHenry was saying about our understanding of what it is to be an Irish person. And I'm wondering whether, because of our history, as we regard ourselves as a people who have been oppressed for 800 years, and who have sent immigrants out all over the world who have experienced discrimination. We couldn't possibly be like that ourselves. We know what it's like, so we wouldn't do it to other people. So if it is actually happening, we can't admit it to ourselves. And we also have the national myth of being a welcoming society who, have open arms to the rest of the world. Sometimes I don't feel like a complete Irish person because I don't have the same religion as most people. And so a lot of my cultural life, my family historical background is atypical. But if I can't be an Irish person, and my family have been here for like 300 or 400 years, what chance do we have?
Many of the newspapers have their sub-editors, editors based outside the Republic of Ireland. If you look at the Mirror as an example, at some stage, they had sub-editors working in Belfast. They don't know what's happening in Dublin, and that is why you had, headlines like free cars for refugees on the rampage. Where competition is at its highest, increased number of media organizations continuously disobey ethics. And the aim of competition in most cases is just to generate either a better headline or more exciting copy. It is a major problem. One of the consequences is what we call superficiality. Is an unfortunate outcome of competition in media. And what does that mean? It occurs when reporters don't go behind questions, but simply report the surface of things based on their own interpretation of events. That leads to racial differentiation. When superficiality involves people from other cultures, it means reporting along the line of racial differentiation. It is important we understand that the role of the media is not to promote diversity. That's extremely important. The role of the media is to provide information. And that information could be sometimes campaigning, depending on the way you see it. It's information that will enable the society to progress, whether it is negative or positive, as long as you give the two sides of the story. As long as you balance it, as long as it's accurate, that is extremely important.
SARI has embarked on a further campaign to have the sports governing bodies who are members of the Irish Sports Council to insert equality clauses in their constitutions alongside child protection and anti-doping. And our research is just completed, and we contacted 63 different sports bodies. They're called national governing bodies, who are members of the Sports Council, from archery to wrestling. And we got a response from 23 organisations. The rest of the organisations didn't see equality as being a major issue for them. But we've since contacted the Minister, Leo Varadkar, and said, look, if they don't have equality clause in their constitutions by 2012, you should stop the funding going to these organisations. So we expect a response from them now, given that they're basically, it'll be a stick rather than a carrot in that case.
Regarding integration, we also face a lot of division and segregation, isolation, and we have to remove the barriers to create equal opportunities according to one's abilities. So, do we really distribute ethnic minority groups so as to have a sort of balance in areas of employment and housing? Many people who came from direct provision of refugees, they were sent to certain areas. They were practically ghettoized. Is that the right thing to do? Or maybe is it because the state did not know how to handle this problem? It was a new problem. Yet across the waters, they've been carrying on with this for years. So are we just ignorant, or do we just want to be naive about what's really happening? Integration is here to stay, and we have to keep working at it. We have to work on an integration policy that's, at the end of the day, operational. Thank you.